Welcome back. I'm Peter Reinhardt. This is Perfect Pizza at Home, and it's time now to make some toppings for our pizzas. We've already made some great doughs. They're rising, fermenting for us, but we've got to put some things on them. And there are a couple topping ingredients that I think are essential for making pizzas at home. You can, of course, get very creative and put almost anything on a pizza, but these are some things that I would suggest everybody have. And by the way, the recipes for these are in your packet, and all you need to do is just download them, and you can follow along, or at least you'll know which ingredients to have on hand. We're going to make basil pesto. I call it pesto genovese because it comes from northern Italy, from Genoa. This is a great all-purpose sauce, and it can be put on either before you bake the pizza or after. It can be used as a garnish as well as a sauce. We're making pizza. We have to have tomato sauce. I'm going to show you my favorite, really easy to make pizza sauce that requires no cooking. Ready to go, fast and easy. We'll make some herb oil, which can also be used for almost anything, not even for pizzas, but as a dipping sauce for breads, as a base for salad dressings, but especially great for marinating tomatoes and other things such as clams, potatoes that can go on top of pizzas. Very fast and easy to make. And also some spicy oil that makes a great finishing garnish to put on your pizza when it comes out of the oven. But first, let's do the pesto. For pesto, you need fresh basil. Fresh is essential. You don't want to use dried basil for this. You can use other herbs such as arugula and fresh parsley, but basil is the classic, and even if you use the other herbs, use mostly fresh basil. We're also going to have some garlic in here, and I call for 8 cloves. It's a lot of garlic, but it works because, as you can see, I sort of sauteed this very lightly in some olive oil, just enough to take the sting, some of those acids that are part of the garlic that burn in your mouth. They're out of this, which allows us to put a lot of garlic. I haven't browned it. It's just ready to go. It took seconds, and the instructions, again, are in your recipe handout. We have some dried cheese. This is Parmesan, but you can also use Romano or Asiago. Any dried cheese will work. Toasted pine nuts are the classic ingredient, but you can also use walnuts, and actually walnuts are also used in Italy for this pesto. But I love these pine nuts. I toast them lightly. You can either do them on the stovetop or in the oven just to get some of the flavors out. We need a good olive oil. I've got some extra virgin olive oil here that we'll be putting in. This is not a time to use the cheapest or lightest olive oil because the flavor in here is important, and this is going to go on top of things after they come out of the oven as well as before. And then my secret ingredient for this is lemon juice, about a half a lemon's worth of juice that will add brightness and a bright flavor, kind of puts an edge, an acidic edge onto the pesto, but it also keeps it bright green for a lot longer. So let's put them all together now. So we're going to put all the basil in. This is one of those food processors that has 2 layers, 2 levels of capacity, so we'll just use the smaller one. This is going to make about a cup and a half of pesto, and this will pound down. Remember, in a mortar and pestle, you would pound this down. I'm going to put all the garlic in. Sounds like a lot, 8 cloves, but it's worth it. I've seen recipes for pesto that only use 2 cloves of garlic, and that's fine. There's a lot of recipes for pesto. This is my favorite go-to version. The pine nuts, I like the chunky sort of pieces of whole pine nuts, so I'm going to hold a few back, but I'll put most of them in and we'll grind them down, and then we'll pour some of these in at the end. I see a little leaf of basil here that got away. We'll throw that into the mixer. The Parmesan cheese, we'll go ahead and put all of that in. I always have extra standing by in case we decide later to adjust flavors. Now, you'll notice also that I really packed the basil leaves. It calls for 2 cups of basil leaves packed. So you really want a lot of basil in here. It looks like a lot now, but it really breaks down. We've got our olive oil, and I'm actually going to wait on that, put that in last. So I'm going to put the lemon juice in now. And we'll go ahead. I'll put some of the olive oil in now, and we'll pour some in, and we'll start processing this down. And I'm going to start pouring this in. And as I turn it off, I'm going to take a peek and see whether it needs more olive oil or more cheese or more nuts. This looks pretty perfect. We don't want this to be super thick because we can thicken it up a little bit later, and it will also thicken as it sits. But we're going to go ahead and transfer this into a bowl. It looks like it's really broken down. You see it only took a few seconds with the food processor for that to happen. So what we have to do is get this out. It's tricky because it's a little oily. Here we go. And I'm going to pour this in to the bowl. We can always adjust the seasoning. You notice I didn't put any salt or pepper in here because the salt is taken care of by the Parmesan cheese. Looks like this blade doesn't want to come out, so we'll just work around it. But we want to get it all out because this is really precious stuff. A lot of expensive ingredients in here. And then we're going to taste it and see if it needs any adjustments. I'm also going to add the rest of my pine nuts at this point, so I have the little crunch factors in there. This is optional. You could always just put the pine nuts, all the pine nuts, into the mixer. Now we've got a great sauce here. It's thick enough to hold in its place, but thin enough so that it will spread a little bit. We'll do a quick taste and see if it needs any more cheese, which will make it more salty, or if we think it needs more olive oil. This is really ready to go. It doesn't really need any adjustments whatsoever. So what you would do with this at this point is cover it very tightly with plastic wrap. I actually put the plastic wrap right on the pesto itself to keep it from oxidizing and turning brown. Put it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. For the pizza sauce, you could always go to the store and buy a jar of any brand of pizza sauce, but I think this is so much better and it's very easy to make. It's almost as easy as opening a jar of commercial sauce. For this, you need a 28-ounce can of any kind of tomato, either ground or crushed tomato product. You could even use tomato puree, but I like the particulates, these little pieces of tomato that are still in both of the ground or the crushed. In Naples, where they make tomato sauce out of the San Marzano tomatoes that grow right in the volcanic ash of Mount Vesuvius, they don't believe they should put anything in the sauce except maybe a pinch of salt or maybe pepper, because those tomatoes are so perfect and so sweet. You may be able to find those at imported stores, and they're expensive, and you don't have to do these other ingredients, but Americans are used to having those Italian herb flavors in their sauce, so these let's consider optional ingredients, but I like to put them in. So I have some oregano and basil. These are dried herbs. Of course, you can always put fresh chopped herbs in here, but the dried herbs are great for this. So I'm going to go ahead and put those right in. A little bit of granulated garlic. Again, you could chop up fresh garlic, but granulated or garlic powder works really well in this sauce. Only a small amount. Some black pepper to kind of give it some zing. I'm going to hold off on the salt until the very end because we need to taste it. And I also have some additional water and some red wine vinegar, which is, again, a secret ingredient. Most brands utilize this. I'm going to put half of this in. I have a tablespoon or so. And I'm going to whisk this up and taste it. Every brand of sauce has a different amount of salt, a different amount of liquid. You can see that this is pretty thick because it has the chunks of tomatoes in it, the small bits. So I'm going to taste it, but I know I'm going to need some water. I want to thin this down a little bit. Remember that pizza sauce will thicken as it cooks on the pizza because it's going to evaporate. So we want it to be thin and easy to spread. Now we're starting to get a little movement here, and that's going to be a lot easier to work with. And I'm going to taste it and see if it needs any other adjustments. Sometimes you don't have to add salt, and again, to your taste. Remember that the cheeses will also add salt to your pizza. Okay, this sauce is almost perfect. I think it needs a pinch of salt. I'm going to put about a half a teaspoon of salt in. The rest of the vinegar, which, as with the pesto, will give a really nice acidic edge to your sauce. And we're going to get and stir this. And at the end, we'll just kind of tap all this out and check it and see how well it spreads with the ladle. One thing to know also that as you make these sauces, they will thicken even as they sit in the refrigerator. So I think I'm going to put just a little bit more water in here, knowing that this will thicken later. We'll do one more tasting, but this sauce is essentially done. So you can see now how nice and loose this sauce is. It pours real easily, and it will be easy to spread. This is important because, again, as sauce thickens, it binds up the flavors. And when it binds the flavors, you don't get the full benefit of the subtlety that's inherent in the tomatoes and in the other ingredients that we put in. Americans are so used to putting thick pizza sauce on their pizzas. I'm not sure why that is, but I always think that this is one of the downfalls of a lot of the commercial pizzerias, is the sauce is too thick and too pasty. And you don't really need a lot of it to make a great pizza. Give one more taste, see if we have the right amount of salt. Perfect. Now you adjust the salt to your own taste, but this sauce is now ready to go. Again, we'll cover it, put it in the refrigerator, and pull it out when we're ready to use it. And this will keep in the refrigerator for a week and even up to 2 weeks. And you can freeze it if you don't use it all up. Now with the tomato sauce, you can see I used a very small amount of Italian herbs because you don't need a lot. These pizzas are loaded with other flavors, so I just had a hint. But when you want the really herbaceous, explosive flavors that you can get from these Mediterranean herbs and spices, here's an herb oil that you can use for a lot of things, and we will. We're going to use this to marinate a number of things that could go on top of a pizza. What I've got here is some olive oil. It can be extra virgin. It should be, but it doesn't have to be extra virgin because it's going to get cooked. So very often you want to save your best olive oils for finishing oils, and you can use the less expensive oils for oils that will be cooked. I have here a nice selection of herbs, and all of these are spelled out in a recipe, but really you could make your own blend. I'm just giving you some suggestions. You want to do this to your own taste. So we have some granulated garlic, we have rosemary, chili pepper flakes, we have paprika and even a little smoked paprika, basil, oregano, marjoram, and black pepper. All of these things will go into the olive oil. It's about a cup of olive oil and this amount of herbs. It will look like a lot of herbs, but believe me, it will get gobbled up by everything else that it goes on. And then we have to put some salt in. And again, I've got about a teaspoon already measured out, and we'll put that in, but we'll taste it because you always want to taste to make sure there's enough salt. Know also that the oil won't really dissolve the salt very quickly, and all the herbs and everything will settle to the bottom. So before you taste it, make sure everything's really stirred well. Get everything up towards the surface, and then just do a quick tasting to see if you want to adjust the seasonings. And again, you can do this to your own taste. Good. Just enough salt to bring out the flavors, but not to dominate, and lots of herbs that will just infuse this oil with flavor. You don't have to heat it, you don't have to cook it. Of course, it will get cooked later when it's on the pizza. So this is really ready. Again, just cover it. You can leave it out for a day or so if you want to keep it, and it will keep for months in the refrigerator. Just cover it with plastic wrap or put it in a sealed jar, chill it down, and this is good to use anytime you want. So I'm going to put this aside and just show you one more topping, and that is our spicy oil. We're not even going to make it. It's already been made. It needs to be cooked. The recipe is in your course material, so you can just cook this yourself. And this is what it looks like when it's done. Once again, lots of herbs and spices, but this time the herbs are boiled, and there's some chili pepper flakes in here. They're all boiled with some fresh garlic, smoked or regular paprika, and you can see how rich and golden red this is. It's sort of a lush red color that is wonderful to drizzle over the top of your pizza. It's a little spicy, a little garlicky. It's fabulous. Again, garnishing is something that you do at the end. We're not going to put this on our pizzas ahead of time. It's just a great thing to have on hand whenever you have company over and want to serve them pizzas. So these are the toppings. And of course, there's one more thing we need to talk about, because what goes on top of a pizza, many pizzas? Cheese. So I'll be back in a second and show you a variety of cheeses that could be options. Not every pizza has to have cheese on it, and not everybody likes cheese on their pizza, but if you're like me and you like cheese on your pizza, then you want good cheese. You don't need a lot. It's not about more cheese. More isn't always better. Better is better. So I have a variety of cheeses here. You can kind of pick and choose and mix and match, but I want to tell you about some of them as options, and then you can pick the ones, of course, that you like best. Everyone knows of low moisture mozzarella. We just call this pizza cheese or mozzarella cheese. And it's a low moisture as opposed to a high moisture mozzarella, which we now call fresh mozzarella. But this is what's on almost all pizzas. It melts down, and you can get it both in a full fat version and in a low fat version. I prefer the full fat for flavor and meltability, but if you're trying to cut back on fat, of course, the low fat is an option. Fresh mozzarella comes in many forms. This is a kind of a loaf that can be sliced. And we're going to slice this later when we put them on our pizzas. And you can slice that into rounds or even into little triangles or smaller bits that you can spread over your pizza. But it also comes, and restaurants tend to use this in balls. We call these ovolinis, little ovals. And this is fresh mozzarella, but it's also kept in its lactic acid bath. This is the whey that is extruded when you make the curds and whey that eventually become cheese. All of these cheeses, by the way, are made in the United States, but in the Italian style from our friends at Belgioioso. This is one of their most popular cheeses is a fresh mozzarella, but they also make a cheese that's hard to find domestically that I love called burrata. This is really the hot cheese of the moment. You can see it's actually two cheeses in one. It's fresh mozzarella wrapped around creme fraiche, which is like rich sour cream cheese, very thick. And this stuff, you put this on a pizza and it just melts into a puddle. This is the ultimate. And up until recently, you would really have to import this at a high price, but now it's made domestically here in the United States. Another domestic cheese that used to be available only imported is called Crescenza or Stracchino. And that's a fresh cheese, kind of almost as soft as cream cheese, but it's not cream cheese, almost like queso fresco that we see in the Mexican markets, and it just melts very, very nicely. Again, Italian cheeses are the standard and the norm for pizzas, but really they're not exclusively the only cheeses that can go on a pizza. This one is Fontina, which is a lot like mozzarella, but it's richer. It's got a little more acidity to it. It melts very in a creamy, buttery manner. I love this stuff. Provolone is another great cheese. Again, all kind of in the same family of cheeses. The aging, the acidity factors change them. And this particular one is called Caciocavallo, and it actually comes to us in these big hunks of loaf, and we just grate it down like this. I just love this one. I think provolone is one of the most underappreciated of the Italian cheeses for pizza. And I sometimes will use it instead of fresh mozzarella. I just love that combination. Blue cheese is great, especially on focaccias and Sicilian pizzas. Small amount, a little goes a long way. I prefer firm blue cheeses rather than well-aged creamy ones because they're hard to get on and they're too strong. They take over. But if you put little bits of blue cheese on, they'll melt into flavor puddles, which is great. And it's also a fabulous combination with caramelized onions. Then we move into kind of the next realm of cheeses. The ones that we don't need a lot of because a little goes a long way are the hard aged cheeses. So here we have three classic examples. We've got Parmesan. Again, this is a domestically made, an American Parmesan. They call it Grana, but in the style of the more expensive Italian imported Parmesans. Flavors are very similar. This is a Romano and an Asiago. All hard cheeses, all made, and the names come really from the regions where the cheeses originated, and now we know them in the United States by those names, even when they're not made in those regions. And here's my secret favorite little bonus cheese, and that is cheddar. Again, very underappreciated. I can't really talk about this too much around Italians because they get very upset because it's not traditional. But I don't care because I don't believe that we're going to be visited by the pizza police. Pizzas are just dough with something on it. We get to choose what goes on it. I love cheddar cheese. This was the secret cheese in my childhood pizzeria's place, Mama's. They would slip a little cheddar in there, and I think it made a difference. It melts just like mozzarella, but it has a totally different flavor profile that actually is quite wonderful. I've seen some pizzerias that use this as their primary cheese. But these are just a few of the many cheeses that you can use. You get to choose. Grate them, have them ready to go, and we'll go on in our next lesson to put all of this together to make pizza. By the way, in the resource section of your course material, you'll find a link to a site at Belgioioso that will give you backgrounds on all of these cheeses and tell you a lot more than I could tell you here. In fact, use the platform, communicate with each other, chat, share ideas. You might have some cheese ideas that you want other people to know about, or pizza ideas. We'd love for you to all to stay in community on this together, and who knows, we may come up with some pizzas that nobody's ever seen before. See you in the next lesson.